got these circumstances that look bad. And then I asked him, I said, after the lie detector test, and I pass it, can we be done with everything? And he said yes. So I feel like if I don't take this, then I'm just going to be drilled.
On the night of July 18th, 2004, a grainy surveillance camera inside a Salt Lake City convenience store captured something that, at the time, looked completely ordinary. A young couple walked through the door, Mark Hacking and his wife, Lori Hacking, who was expecting their first child. They browsed the aisles, exchanged a few words, maybe grabbed a snack. Nothing alarming, nothing out of place. But here's the chilling part. Those few seconds of footage would become some of the last known images of Lori Hacking alive. Within hours, she would be gone. Not just missing, but murdered. And the man walking beside her in that footage, the man she trusted with her life, and the life of their unborn child, was the very person who would take both. This is the story of Lori Hacking, a woman betrayed by the one person who was supposed to love her most. A case built on years of elaborate deception, a single devastating discovery, and a crime so calculated it left an entire city searching a landfill for what remained of a young woman's life. Stay with me, because every detail in this case matters. And the deeper we go, the darker it gets. At 10:49 in the morning on July 19th, 2004, a man named Mark Hacking dialed 911 from Salt Lake City, Utah. His voice was measured, controlled. He told the dispatcher that his wife Lori had gone out for her morning jog and had never come home. He said she went running at around 5 a.m., as she often did, through Memory Grove Park, a popular trail area not far from their apartment. He said he slept in, woke up around 8 a.m., and simply assumed she had already showered, got ready, and driven herself to work. That was plausible, he explained. Sometimes she woke him up for a ride. Sometimes she just took the car herself. But when he called her office around 10 a.m. to say hello, a co-worker named Brandon answered and asked almost immediately. That's when Mark says he panicked. He jumped in his car and drove up to Memory Grove. He found her car parked along the road near the park entrance, exactly where she always left it when she went running. But Lori was nowhere to be found. On the surface, this sounds like a husband desperately searching for his missing wife. But as investigators would soon learn, almost nothing about Mark Hacking's account was what it appeared to be. News of Lori's disappearance spread quickly. She was young, pregnant, and well-liked in her community. Her family wasted no time. The day after she went missing, Lori's family held a press conference and made an emotional plea for anyone with information to come forward. They were composed but visibly devastated, the kind of grief that is raw and real, born from the gut punch of not knowing. The response from the public was remarkable. More than 200 volunteers mobilized to search for Lori. They fanned out across Salt Lake City, distributing missing persons flyers, canvassing neighborhoods, walking trails. Her face was plastered on posters across the city. Local news stations ran her story. Everyone wanted to help bring her home. Mark Hacking participated in the search. He gave media interviews. He spoke about how much he loved his wife, how worried he was, how she was the most important person in the world to him. To most people watching, he looked like a grieving husband clinging to hope. But detectives are trained to look past appearances. And the more time they spent with Mark Hacking, the more something felt wrong. Investigators brought Mark in for questioning. Standard procedure in a missing persons case is to start with the person closest to the victim. He came willingly and agreed to talk. The early part of the interview seemed routine enough. Mark walked detectives through his morning, explaining that he'd woken up, couldn't find Lori, and had gone about some errands before realizing something was wrong. My wife got up at 5 o'clock this morning, went running, he told them. I stayed in bed. I woke up at 8 o'clock and she hadn't awakened me. He said he assumed she'd already left for work. So he got up, watched some TV, played his Nintendo, and then, here's where it gets strange, went out and bought a mattress. Let that sink in for a moment. His pregnant wife is late to work, hasn't called, hasn't come home from her run. And Mark Hacking's response is to go mattress shopping. He told detectives they had been planning to get a new mattress anyway. He found a store near R.C. Willey on 21st South that was already open just after 9 a.m. He went in, bought a mattress for around $500, picked up 2 pillows for about $50 each. loaded the mattress on top of his car with twine, took it home, and started making the bed. It was while he was putting sheets on this brand new mattress that he called Lori's work phone. And that's when he found out she hadn't come in. Detectives pressed him on the details. He remembered the exact price of the mattress. He remembered the price of the pillows. But he couldn't remember the name of the store. He said it had something to do with sleeping comfortably. He knew it was near R.C. Willey. He knew the twine he used to tie down the mattress was in the dumpster. The twine was in the dumpster. That detail, casual as it sounds, would become critically important. As the interview continued, the inconsistencies started stacking up. Mark's timeline was fuzzy in places that mattered and oddly precise in places that didn't. His emotional effect was flat in a way that detectives noticed. He wasn't falling apart. He wasn't angry. He was calm, almost too calm, like a man reciting a prepared statement rather than a husband living a nightmare. He explained that when he arrived at Memory Grove and found Lori's car, he had already tried calling police from his apartment, but the line was busy. So he drove to the park first, called again from his cell phone, and was told they couldn't file a missing persons report for 24 hours. He said other people, Lori's friends and co-workers who had come to help search, were the ones who ultimately got police to come to the scene. Detectives noted that Mark showed little urgency in the early part of the morning. He slept until 8 o'clock. He went mattress shopping. He didn't call the police until nearly 11 o'clock a.m. For a man whose pregnant wife had supposedly gone missing, his morning looked remarkably normal. Meanwhile, investigators were quietly uncovering something far more alarming back at the hacking apartment. While Mark was in the interrogation room, forensic teams were going through his home. What they found was disturbing. First, they discovered Lori's car keys and purse, still inside the apartment. If she had driven herself to work or anywhere else that morning, she would have needed those. Their presence at home cast serious doubt on the theory that she had simply driven away or taken off on her own. Then the forensic team found something far more sinister. A knife in the bedroom with what appeared to be blood on it, along with fibrous material stuck to the blade. The kind of material consistent with carpet or mattress fabric. And inside Mark's vehicle, investigators found a blood stain. These pieces of evidence pointed in one direction. But detectives weren't ready to move yet. They needed to confirm whose blood it was. Until then, they kept their cards close. There was also something else the investigators had learned from talking to Lori's family. She and Mark were supposedly preparing for a major life change. Mark had recently graduated from the University of Utah and had been accepted to medical school at the University of North Carolina. The couple was planning to pack up and move across the country so Mark could pursue his dream of becoming a doctor. A big move, a new baby on the way, an exciting future ahead. At least, that's what everyone around them believed. Back in the interrogation room, detectives decided to make a move. They presented Mark with the option of taking a lie detector test. Not a traditional polygraph, but a more modern truth verification system. The detective explained how it worked, tried to make it sound routine, non-threatening. Mark's reaction was telling. He hesitated. He asked questions. He said he felt coerced, even though the detective made clear he could walk out the door at any moment. "I've got these circumstances that look bad," Mark admitted. And then, in a moment of almost startling self-awareness, he said, "I asked him, after the lie detector test, and I pass it, can we be done with everything? And he said yes. So, I feel like if I don't take this, I'm just going to be drilled." The detective pushed back gently. If he had nothing to hide, he had nothing to lose. The machine only confirmed what was already true. Mark thought about it. Then he said he didn't want to take it. He refused the polygraph. In that moment, the room shifted. A man who claimed to have no idea what happened to his wife, a man who said he was desperate to find her, just refused the one tool that could help clear his name. Detectives didn't say much. They let the silence do the work. Shortly after the interrogation ended, something extraordinary happened. Mark Hacking was spotted running naked through the streets of Salt Lake City, wearing nothing but his sandals. He was taken into custody, not for questioning this time, but for a psychiatric evaluation. He was admitted to a hospital and placed under observation. Whatever composure he had managed to maintain through the interrogation had completely collapsed. And it was in that hospital, stripped of his facade and alone with what he had done, that Mark Hacking finally broke. He called his brothers, Scott and Lance, and asked them to come to him. When they arrived, he told them everything. He said that in the early hours of July 19th, around midnight, as Lori lay sleeping in their bed, he took a .22 caliber rifle and shot her in the head, just like that, while she slept, while she was carrying his child. After killing her, he wrapped her body in a carpet and transported her remains to a nearby dumpster, one close to the University of Utah, the institution where he had supposedly built his academic career. Then he returned home and disposed of the evidence. The knife found in the bedroom, that's what he used to cut the mattress, the blood-soaked mattress that could have exposed everything. He cut it apart and threw it in the dumpster along with the rifle, and then he went and bought a new mattress. The mattress purchase wasn't a sign of indifference. It was part of the cleanup. He needed a new mattress because the old one was covered in his wife's blood. His brothers immediately went to police and relayed everything Mark had told them. By the time investigators finished processing what they had heard, the case transformed from a missing persons investigation into a homicide. The question that lingered over everything was, why? Why would a man kill his pregnant wife? What could have happened in that apartment on the night of July 18th to push him to something so monstrous? The answer had been hiding in plain sight, buried beneath years of lies so elaborate that even the people closest to Mark had no idea the truth didn't exist. Here's what investigators pieced together. Mark Hacking had been lying about his entire professional identity for years. He had told Lori, and everyone around them, that he had graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in pre-medicine. He had told her he had applied to and been accepted by medical school in North Carolina. That's why they were moving. That's why they were starting this new chapter together. None of it was true. Mark had never earned a degree. He had never applied to medical school. He had never been accepted anywhere. He had constructed an entire false future and asked the woman who loved him to build her life around it. On July 18th, 2004, the day before Lori disappeared, she found out. She had called the University of North Carolina herself to finalize housing arrangements for their move. And during that call, she discovered that no one named Mark Hacking had been admitted to their medical program. Confused, she dug deeper. She contacted the University of Utah. Same answer. Mark had no degree on record. Everything she thought she knew about her husband, his education, his ambitions, their future together, was a fabrication. Investigators also found a letter Lori had written, not sent, but written. A raw, emotional document that read in part, "I hate coming home from work because it hurts. I can't imagine life with you if things don't change." She had also been seen leaving her office in tears the day before her disappearance. Her manager confirmed she was deeply upset. And on the night of July 18th, after discovering the full scope of Mark's deception, Lori wrote him a note. She told him she was leaving. That note was her death sentence. Mark Hacking, faced with the collapse of his false identity and the loss of his marriage, chose the most extreme possible response. Rather than face the consequences of his lies, he picked up a rifle and ended his wife's life while she slept. After Mark's confession was relayed to investigators, the search shifted dramatically. This was no longer about finding a missing woman. It was about recovering a victim. Detectives knew the general area where Mark said he had disposed of Lori's body, a dumpster near the University of Utah. But dumpsters get emptied, and when they do, the contents go to a landfill. A massive months-long search of the Salt Lake City landfill began. Hundreds of workers and volunteers carefully sifted through mountains of refuse, searching for human remains. It was grueling, heartbreaking work, carried out by people who had never met Lori, but who understood what finding her would mean to the people who loved her. The search continued through the summer and into fall. On October 1st, 2004, more than 2 months after Lori vanished, searchers found what they were looking for. Human remains were recovered from the landfill and eventually confirmed to be those of Lori Hacking. Due to the state of decomposition, medical examiners were unable to determine whether her unborn child could have survived. 2 lives, Lori's and the baby she was carrying, had been taken. On August 2nd, 2004, Mark Hacking was formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He initially entered a plea of not guilty, a position that, given his own confession to his brothers and the mountain of physical evidence, seemed almost absurd. But the legal process moves at its own pace. Negotiations continued, and eventually, Mark Hacking changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for the dismissal of additional charges. On June 6, 2005, he was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison, the maximum sentence allowed under Utah law at the time. It was a sentence that frustrated many people who followed the case. 6 years for murdering a pregnant woman? It felt inadequate, even obscene. But Utah law at the time capped the minimum sentence for certain murder charges. And a month after sentencing, the Utah Board of Pardons made an additional ruling that provided some measure of closure. Mark Hacking would not be eligible for parole until at least 2035. That means he would serve a minimum of 30 years behind bars before he would even have the chance to argue for release. 30 years. For 2 lives taken in the night while they slept. Cases like this one raise an uncomfortable question. How does something like this happen? How does a man build such an elaborate lie, sustain it for years, and share a life with someone who never knew the truth? The lies Mark told weren't small. They weren't white lies or exaggerations. He fabricated an entire academic career. He presumably created some paper trail, or at least enough conversation, to convince Lori and their family that he was on a legitimate path toward becoming a doctor. He may have staged conversations about medical school, pretended to study, fabricated acceptance letters, or simply deflected questions skillfully enough that no one thought to check. Lori trusted him, and that trust made her vulnerable to a deception she never saw coming. There's also something deeply tragic about the letter investigators found, the one in which Lori wrote about how much it hurt to come home. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't know the full extent of it. She was unhappy. She was contemplating leaving, but she hadn't acted yet. When she finally had the evidence she needed, when the lies were confirmed by the university itself, she didn't run away quietly. She confronted it directly. She wrote Mark a note. She told him she was leaving. That act of courage cost her her life. Go back to that convenience store footage. July 18th, 2004. Mark and Lori walking in together. She was pregnant. She was scared about the future. She may have already had suspicions that something was deeply wrong, but she was alive. Within hours, her husband would shoot her while she slept and spend the next several hours dismantling the evidence, disposing of her body, and constructing a performance he would take all the way to a police interrogation room. When you watch the footage now, knowing what you know, it hits differently. You're not watching a couple on an ordinary night. You're watching the final hours of a woman whose trust was used as a weapon against her. You're watching someone who deserved so much better than what she got. Lori Hacking was 27 years old. She was going to be a mother. She was building a life based on a future that her husband had invented from nothing. And when she discovered the truth, when she finally decided to hold him accountable, she paid the ultimate price. The Mark Hacking case is a reminder that the people closest to us are also the people best positioned to harm us. Intimate partner violence doesn't always look like rage or obvious danger signs. Sometimes it looks like a mattress purchase at 9:30 in the morning. Sometimes it looks like a calm man in an interrogation room, remembering the price of pillows but forgetting the name of the store. Sometimes it looks like 2 people walking into a convenience store on a summer night. The woman smiling, unaware that the person beside her has already begun to calculate what comes next. If this story affected you, please take a moment to share it. Lori Hacking deserves to be remembered, not just as a victim, but as a real person. A woman who was brave enough to confront a lie, even when it cost her everything. Rest in peace, Lori. And that's the moment it all becomes clear. The lies, the panic, and the realization that there's no escape left. What began as deception ended in tragedy, leaving behind a truth too heavy to outrun. This wasn't just the end of an interrogation. It was the end of a lie that cost 2 innocent lives. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next true crime deep dive.